And welcome to our community. Susie Thomas with you this morning. So happy to welcome Todd Biss and Jack Harris. They are from Young Life. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Good morning, Susie.
So somebody might be brand new in town and go, Young Life? Why, what is that all about? So Todd, first of all, what is your position with Young Life and what is it?
So I am the committee chairman of Young Life. It's a volunteer position, and our committee is just a group of folks who are concerned about youth in our community and have said, many of us actually have Young Life experience. Many of us came to know the Lord through Young Life and have said, hey, we want to see this continue in Stark County, and we value the youth in our community, and they're struggling with so many things. We want to make sure this organization exists for them.
Yeah. Jack, how about you? You've been involved for some time, right?
Young Life started in Kent in the 1968-1969 academic year, and that's when I got involved.
You were from the very beginning.
I'm much older than I look, you see. And I was involved as a club kid later, like Todd suggested. We've both been volunteer leaders and worked in various capacities, and I'm a previous committee chair. Like Todd, currently serve on the committee and help with finances as well.
How did it come to town? How did we merit getting something like this in our area?
Well, Jack, you were actually here at that time. Do you want to tell that story
So
briefly?
who were some of these people?
There were people in the community, primarily Bill Clark was a real push behind it, but also Jack and Phyllis Milliken.
Yes.
The Houses and Mansfields, I believe, were the primary families that got it started. They just had a heart for this community and a heart for kids and a heart for the Lord. And Bill Clark had looked at a number of different organizations and felt that Young Life was going to be the best to serve our community. So he reached out to them about getting an area director. And Chuck Rosemeyer rode into town on a motorcycle. And
didn't he have a specific look that kind of caught people off guard? Well, first of all, being on the motorcycle.
Everything about Young Life
boots,
caught people off guard back in the day. Yeah, it was, are these hippies? Is this for real? Is this a good thing? Is this a cult? Do you remember hearing all those kinds of things?
Yes.
And then you'd hear the names associated, like Bill Clark and the Milligans and so forth, and you think,
of the community.
Okay, they really are. And they put their money where their mouth was, didn't they, to really get that going. I'm fascinated by those beginnings, because that doesn't seem that long ago. I'm sorry.
It wasn't.
But you're talking about
I'm not sure, guys.
1968. Okay.
You youngsters just don't know.
We're talking about a 50th reunion here, which is, and that's why you're here.
I was only 5 when I started.
Of course, and me as well.
Life.
Me as well. But boy, weren't those great days.
Yes, they were.
Yes, and Todd, that's what brings you here. You are the youngster in the room.
Which is funny because I'm definitely not that young, but I have seen a lot of years and a lot of Young Life, and we are super excited about this 50th, as you mentioned. Just a chance to really celebrate the history of Young Life in those early days, and so we're throwing a big bash for everyone who was ever involved or wanted to be involved to attend. It's wide open to anyone. It's free to the public.
When is that going to be?
So that actually happens July 20th, and it happens at MAPS Air Museum.
Really cool location
it's such
to have it.
Cool venue. We've seen a few different things happen there, and it's got space for hundreds, and that's exactly what we expect. So
and how much to attend?
It's free to attend. There will be food trucks there, so it actually starts, doors open at 4:30. We're going to do food trucks and have some games for kids. It's open to families. It's obviously a family-friendly event, and food would be on your own, of course. That would be something you'd be responsible for paying for. But we've got a nice collection. The LePages have worked hard, Anna LePage, and getting that there. So that's exciting. Games, as I said, for the kids. And then we're going to do a club. And that club is going to be, I think, a riot as we look at music through the decades. And it's going to have an absolute it's going to have an absolute Young Life feel to it. I mean, it's going to have Young Life fingerprints all over it as far as the craziness and the skits and the music and the message.
Yes.
There will be a talk that clearly points people towards the Lord and encourages folks that way.
What a great opportunity And I'm thinking, okay, the crazy teens of that time, the hippies people, well, we're all grandparents now. So what a great opportunity to take your children, grandchildren. Perhaps there's someone who's praying for that one in the family. Here's an opportunity to take them to a really fun event, very non-threatening event, and have a great time, and they're going to get to hear about the Lord. Yeah. What an awesome opportunity.
Young Life has been described at various times as a party with a purpose. That's exactly how Todd and the others on the committee have shaped this up. This is just going to be a great time with a purpose.
Absolutely. It's interesting that you're talking about what kids face now, and it's interesting that you were saying Clarks and Milligans and so forth were concerned about what kids faced then. Let's compare then and now. Do you kind of think that almost time has gone cyclical and that young people are facing some very different challenges, but some very similar challenges as in the 60s? The eras seem almost equally turbulent. Do you agree or run with that statement? Prove me wrong or right.
I would agree, and Ty can probably get into the details because he's worked club, but the one consistency across all this, we've got college students working as volunteer leaders in our clubs. We also have this young man in his 60s, JR, working in the clubs.
Wow.
And he is equally acceptable to the teens as the college students because the bottom line across all those generations, they just want someone who will listen to them and care about them as an individual. And you don't have to be a particular age to be able to do that with a teenager. You just have to have a heart and a desire to do it.
That might be different and that might be different from back in the 60s when you didn't trust people over 30. That was one of the sayings.
Unless they wore tennis shoes.
Right. Or unless they had the right kind of jeans and tennis shoes and hairstyle. Okay, I don't have time to grow my hair down to my hips between now and July 20th and kind of get that look. Maybe find a wig. I don't know. But what is the dress? What's the dress code?
It's wide open, obviously. This is the MAPS Air Museum. We're going to have the weather permitting, had the doors wide open, and so it's really come as you are. It's nothing in particular. So I'm sure there'll be cornhole and things like that going on, and so it's really whatever feels comfortable for you.
What can we look forward to as far as will there be photographs? Will there be, what kinds of things are you planning? What have you got up your sleeve?
Yeah, so the challenging thing is just the amount of time we have. We've had so many ideas, and we have a steering committee that's been working hard on this, and so there's so many thoughts that have floated through. But we have landed on the fact that we need to have something that kind of represents all the decades. So it's kind of cool the way we've even set this up. So as we started to reach out to people, we have people that we're calling trip leaders, kind of in calling out the way it works when you go to camp. And so you have a trip leader who's in charge of the whole trip. And then within that trip, you have different cabins. So each decade has a trip leader, and then those trip leaders are rounding up cabin leaders to say, all right, who are the people that you are most connect with? And so we're basically looking at laying out tables that are based on decades. So we'll have a table that represents the 70s, and that'll have photos and paraphernalia. Think carefully about paraphernalia. Things like back then in the 70s, we used a lot of songbooks, right?
Yes.
I mean, so I've heard. And I remember seeing some of those in the 80s. Well, in the 80s, it moved into overhead projectors.
Yeah, we didn't have those in the...
Okay, right. And now everything is just projected from a laptop. So things that kind of represent that decade are going to be on those tables, and lots of images, lots of photos. And a few surprises that people will find out about as well. But yeah, there will be a lot of historical imagery from that time, from those different decades.
What schools are really hosting Young Life now in the area? What schools are into it, and where is it into?
Yeah, so we have Young Life Club right now in Jackson. We have it at Hoover, Glen Oak, McKinley, and then Massillon. We just added a full-time staff person in Massillon. So
Wonderful.
Those are our primary high schools. Within those high schools, we have a couple middle school things that are happening. Young Life started to realize that there were younger people than high school who needed some love, if you will. And so we started Wildlife is what they call it. So a lot of middle. Yeah, you can imagine, and
It's so perfectly
yeah,
named.
WYL, wildlife.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is aptly named, and so we have several wildlife clubs going on, and then we also have Capernaum, which is an outreach to kids with special needs.
Oh, awesome.
And so we just got that going this past year, and it all takes volunteer leaders. That's the biggest challenge. We'd love to be in even more places, but we have a lot of ministries going right now in Stark County, and we're super excited about that.
There's something about a Young Life meeting, a club meeting, that it almost doesn't matter. Not almost. It does not matter which group you hang out with in school. And we all know high school can be a little bit, breakfast clubby, where there's the different, how do we put it? I don't want to say cliques. I'm trying not to say cliques, but, different.
Subcultures?
Yes,
There you go.
Your different spheres of influence in high school. And so, but Young Life was one place where all those little silos completely dissolved, and you were all best pals, whether you were going to the Young Life barn or whether it was your after-school club meeting or whether we used to meet at each other's houses sometimes. I don't know what club looks like now. I haven't been to one in years. And but it would be really fun to compare now as to then. But do you find the same thing where kids are just kids across all their subcultures?
Absolutely, and I kind of going back to Jack's answer to your earlier question, that is the consistent, is that kids are still lonely, kids are still broken, kids are still hurting, and this is a place that they can find love in an unconditional way, so they feel safe and protected, and it does cross over all kinds of those subcultures, and you find kids hanging out that would never normally hang out.
Right.
Sometimes it takes a little while. Sometimes it takes a moment to say, wow, this is a different place than where I was, in the high school 3 hours earlier. We do meet at a lot of kids' homes now in the evening. That's still the go-to place for the most part. And so to leave the school, I guess it's more than 3 hours, but to leave the school at 2 or 2:30 and all those cliques/subcultures exist, and then to think, okay, 4 or 5 hours later, I'm now going to be in the room with people, and I need to ignore those. Sometimes that takes a little getting used to, but once they get used to it, then they absolutely love it.
And isn't it just the most eye-opening experience for a kid who may feel like they are all on their own, totally isolated, don't feel like they make friends easily, to find out that the captain of the football team has those same feelings, and that they're able to really connect. You see some great friendships bond, don't you?
For sure.
That, as you say, probably wouldn't have happened otherwise. And then that translates back into school, too, where that, you kind of start to see somebody really start to find themselves and see, oh, my gosh, they are going through everything I'm going through. And it's pretty cool to see. And also, great to see kids just come out of themselves, stop thinking about themselves altogether, and start thinking about that other person. They find they're a lot happier I think that was my takeaway from Young Life. We're all a lot happier if we're not thinking about ourselves.
And honestly, I feel like when I look at this event coming up, a lot of the things you just described are exactly some of the things we want to experience on that evening. There are folks who have grown up in the church for long periods of time, and they hear about Young Life as a Christian organization, and then they come to a Young Life event, or they meet kids who are quote unquote involved in Young Life, and sometimes the behavior is not typically Christian, and they're like, wait, I thought this was a Christian event. So they try and figure that out and reconcile that. And I just want to make it clear that Jesus went to those who were most in need, who were hurting the most, and not the ones in the synagogues necessarily. And so Young Life is very much an outreach to people of every cultural background, experience, position in life. So it's fascinating, and we expect that evening is going to be the same way. We don't expect that those 300 to 500 folks who are going to be there are all avid churchgoers. It'll be a collection, and it'll be a lot of fun and an opportunity again to remind those of us who are following Christ that you're on the right path, and this is where we need to be. There's nothing more important than our relationship with Him, and then to continue to point those who aren't in a relationship with the Lord at all, to continue to point them towards Him. So
in a whole in an atmosphere of love, they feel loved into the kingdom. We're visiting with Todd Biss and Jack Harris, talking about a big Young Life reunion coming up. You don't want to miss it. Stay with us. You're listening to Our Community.